et du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
The Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is in a German hospital now after Russian medical officials delayed allowing his transport out of the country, saying he was too ill to travel. Navalny has been in a coma since Thursday, wherein he is believed to have been poisoned while on a flight from the Siberian city of Tomsk to Moscow. And as with several other prominent critics of Vladimir Putin, suspicions are high that the Russian state is behind the poisoning, as it has been a preferred method of Putin allies to silence critics. Leaders around the world have spoken out about the apparent attacks. Most leaders. One has been notably silent. I'll give you a second to guess who it is. Yup, Donald Trump. Trump hasn't offered even basic concern over a prominent dissident being poisoned, regardless of whether or not it was at the behest of the Russian leader. But then Trump hasn't been too concerned about intelligence that suggests that Russians may have been paying for the Taliban to kill actual American fighters in Afghanistan, or that the Russians interfered in the last election, or a new report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence that the Russian officials may be interfering in this election that is 72 days away. So why concern yourself with just another Russian dissident? Well, my next guest has himself been a target, having been poisoned twice, once back in 2015, again in 2017. He writes in a Washington Post op-ed that it's imperative for the world to take notice and take action against these political assassination attempts and to speak out, saying, quote, "It is much easier to commit a crime in silence than in the spotlight. I am living testimony to that. A strong stance from world leaders on both sides of the Atlantic will help ensure that Russian authorities allow Navalny's doctors to do their job." I'm joined now by Russian opposition politician, Vice President of the Free Russia Federation, Vladimir Kara-Murza. Vladimir, you write in the Washington Post this week, the official diagnosis in your poisonings from the hospital was toxic action by unidentified substance, meaning in plain language, poisoning by an unknown source. Multiple organ failure, brain swelling, and a prolonged coma follows. Sounds very familiar. Both times, doctors told my wife I had about a 5% chance to live. So the good news is that with Navalny now in a German hospital where the German doctors seem to think he was poisoned, there is some chance he may be able to recover. You, of course, were treated in Russia, and they did save your life.
They did, and I'm going to be eternally grateful to that I did make those 5%. But you're absolutely right in what you said a few minutes ago, that poison really has been a favorite tool of security services back since Soviet days, but this practice has really proliferated since Vladimir Putin came to power. And there's a long and growing list of political opponents, independent journalists, foreigners they don't like, those they perceive as traitors, who have, encountered these mishaps or accidents or poisonings. And some have been fortunate enough to survive, as I was, and as I hope to God Alexei Navalny will be. Others were less fortunate. Yuri Shakachykin, an investigative journalist and opposition lawmaker, died a horrible death in Moscow in 2003 from what certainly was deliberate poisoning. But, this is a method that's designed, I think, to give the Kremlin plausible deniability. Because every time something like this happens, Kremlin spokespeople shrug their shoulders and say, how do we know it's poisoning? Where is your proof? Now, that is, of course, a question that is designed to have no answer, because proof is supposed to come from investigations that Russian authorities refuse to allow. Both times I was poisoned, my lawyer and I went to the Russian Investigative Committee, which is the top law enforcement body in Russia, to request criminal investigations. And, surprise, surprise, it's been more than 5 years now since my first poisoning, and we haven't even had a response from them.
Vladimir, sometimes that pressures investigations. Other times it's international pressure. One would expect, as you've written about, that you would get some response, even if it's a less than committal response from the U.S. president or high up in the U.S. government. But we're not even getting that. All Trump was able to say was, we are looking at it. We are looking at it, which is what he says about everything that is alleged to be bad.
Well, as I said, it's much easier to commit a crime in darkness than it is when the spotlight is on. And I want to use this opportunity to thank everybody on both sides of the Atlantic, and that includes congressional leaders in the United States on both sides of the political aisle, Democrats and Republicans, who have spoken out in the last several days. And I think this international spotlight is a major reason why Alexei Navalny is in safe hands now. I know in my case, international spotlight was very important. And, when the late Senator John McCain took to the Senate floor to speak about my case when I was lying in a coma in a Moscow hospital, I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he's one of those people to whom I owe my life. So this spotlight was very important. As to silence from the White House, there is a historical term for this kind of policy, and that historical term is appeasement. And history has taught us, I think, without any doubt, that appeasing dictators simply does not work. And we don't even need to go back to distant historical precedents to talk about this. We can look at it with the regime of Vladimir Putin. Every American president of both parties since Putin was in power were appeasing him in one way or another. We all remember President Bush looking into Putin's eyes and praising him as a great reformer. President Obama declared a reset with Putin, and his administration tried to stop the Magnitsky Act from being passed, which is a law on targeted sanctions against human rights abuses among Russian officials. President Trump has equated, what democratic nations do with what authoritarian regimes like Putin's do, and invited Putin to G8 summits, and he keeps talking about this for some reason. Appeasement does not work. The only result of appeasement is emboldening dictators and making their excesses and their abuses even worse. And coming back to the situation with Alexei Navalny, by the way, poison is a preferred method, but it's not the only one. This week marked 2,000 days, more than 5 years, since Boris Nemtsov, the leader of the Russian opposition, was literally gunned down in front of the Kremlin in Moscow. And to this day, the Russian government continues to protect those who organized and masterminded it. So I think it is very important to say that this impunity will not last forever. Putin is not going to be in power forever. And those people who do these things will have to face responsibility in a democratic Russia, I have no doubt. But for now, in the West, including in the United States, I think it is very important that there should be no more talk of resets, no more talk of any kind of overtures or invitations to summits or any kind of other appeasement tactics towards a regime that speaks with its political opponents in the language of poisons and bullets.
Vladimir, I don't know if there's any luck with that happening in the next 72 days. This administration seems quite committed to its policy of appeasement. We're glad you're here. We'll continue to keep a light on Navalny and continue to cover this. Thank you for joining us, sir. Vladimir Kara-Murza is a Russian opposition politician who has been poisoned twice. He's the vice president of the Free Russia Foundation.
It is Monday, the 24th of August of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Well, we had another one of those weekends. It looks like we're going to get rid of one of the little Himmlers. Yeah, Kellyanne is going to spend more time with the family. And it looks like George is going to go spend more time with the family. And it looks like Claudia's finally got him home to spend more time with the family. Though I don't know, Claudia might consider that to not be such a good idea. She's, now granted, she's 15, and you know the mother-daughter dynamic. I mean, geez, it's pretty fraught in any situation, and even more so in this. But she wanted to be emancipated. Well, I got to tell you, every 15-year-old does at some point. And that... a lot of people are saying that was enough to bring Kellyanne and George home. I think it's something a little bit more. But this is a family affair. We can make fun of Kellyanne all we want. We can even make fun of George and wonder about it. But we're talking about a 15-year-old child still. I know she's a young woman, but she's still a child. And they need to figure it out. I've been saying all along, I'm really pulling for the daughter in this mother-daughter dynamic, and it looks like maybe, just maybe, that family will consider family first. I'm not so sure, but yeah, I've got the right wing already are attacking Claudia, calling her terrible, terrible names, too. I mean, a 15-year-old. Jeez, boy, these people are really cult Kool-Aid drinkers, aren't they? Well, they are American carnage, the cause of it, actually. And we are America the Beautiful, because we truly are. All of us, each and every one, is beautiful in our own right. All we have to do is admit it, and then we see the beauty in all. I think that's the American dream, and we can make that dream a reality. In fact, we were well on our way until somebody, or a group of somebodies, decided, hey, we like carnage, and carnage is much more fun than getting along. Yeah, well, we're not looking for fun, all right? We're looking and getting along so we can fill the potholes, repair the bridges, and make sure that maybe the forest floors are swept so we don't have all these wildfires. And you know how you sweep the forest floors? By attending to climate change when you were supposed to. And you didn't. So we didn't sweep the forest floors and accept the fact that climate change was a harbinger of things to come, and here they are. And now we're wondering why. Yeah, it's like a miracle. Okay, well, Trump wants to get some sort of weird, what's it called? Convalescent plasma. He wants to rush that to market. He's looking for some sort of miracle cure because he can then put his hat on that and say he doesn't wear a hat, but rhetorically, and say, look, I brought the cure. I am God's emissary on earth. In fact, he doesn't think he's God's emissary on earth. He thinks he is God on earth. Emissary. Gee, emissaries are for losers. And so he is bringing cures that until now, no one would ever think about bringing to market this soon. I mean, come on. We had like bleach, then we have oleander, and now we have cosmetic plasma. Okay, they call it convalescent for a reason. I know it's a medical term and it means a particular specific meaning, but I kind of like to play around with the fact that it sounds to me like it's going to put you in a convalescent state. Oh, boy, this world. We somehow allowed this guy to get to a position in which he can then be put into the Oval Office. And guess who's helping out in the RNC this week? We were extolling the great production and stagecraft chops of the DNC. I spoke about it grandly during Tim Corrimal's show, and by the way, and you can catch that later on in the day. That'd be 4:30 out here on the West Coast. 6:30 on the East, obviously. But I am still extolling the stagecraft, the great production values and thoughtfulness that went into the DNC. Well, it looks like we're going to have the production staff and Gary Burnett running the RNC production. Yeah. The production staff of The Apprentice, the reality TV show that somehow propelled Trump into this godlike status, because I guess the people who watch that show, I admit, that kind of show is not my style. The idea of some imperious boss yelling, "You're fired," and people are supposed to be entertained by that. Oh, come on. I mean, I hated being that boss, and I never was. The idea of firing someone was just, I hated it. Every boss does. Well, the ones that have a heart. But they prop this guy up as some sort of guy who just reveled in you're fired. Well, he revels in people being fired. He just can't say it. He has emissaries do it for him. But, emissaries are for losers. So the circular logic is circular. He just doesn't realize it. So Gary Burnett, the production staff of The Apprentice, are going to take over the RNC this week, and I guess they're going to Himmler and Goebbels us without Kellyanne. Oh, no, they have Kellyanne until the end of the month. That's right. And then they don't need her after the election because it doesn't matter whether he wins or not. They're going to do what they're going to do. And they have an army to help them do it now. Wow. Who ever thought that that would happen? All of us. Every single one. The day after the inauguration, when we had the Women's March, we knew exactly what Trump was capable of. When he started putting the ban on Muslims at the airports, and when he started locking up babies in icebox baby gulags after kidnapping them and taking them from their parents and never giving them back. Once again, I'm going to remind people that both in Peru and Argentina and in Chile, dissidents' kids were taken away from them and somehow ended up in the adopted status of generals and other right-wing aristocrats of society. Yeah. And then we talk about some sort of weird child sex trafficking ring. Yeah, right. Uh-huh. Once they start talking about that, you better start investigating the people who are bringing it up. Oh, my God. First place I start looking is in every white evangelical Baptist minister's house, and then go from there. Check out the congregation. Who goes to church with a guy like that? Other people that like a guy like that, obviously. Oh, which reminds me, now Jerry Falwell Jr. is blaming the pool boy, for having an affair with his wife. No. He and the pool boy had a little tete-a-tete, and, his wife Jerry Falwell's wife is a beard. Come on. You don't get to be a tent revivalist preacher at that status without having a wife as a beard. You gotta. It's almost required. And anyway, that's a really odd sort of dynamic. If you want to go by the constraints of what Falwell's Liberty University demands, all right. Well, that's another I told you so. I told you so. Even before Junior was a glimmer in Daddy's eye. Glimmer. Ugh. Can you imagine? Oh, God, just the idea of sex with, between the senior Falwells is bad enough, let alone the juniors. All right, well, there is so much more going on in the world, and we know it is. And, of course, we had to put ourselves in a bubble so that we could have a curated show, because that's what we like to do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We curate. Well, of course, at the top, Trump's silence on Navalny only emboldens Putin, and just like all the other silences, bounties, what have you. On the rest of the menu, deaths from excitable delirium after ketamine injections during arrests is drawing new scrutiny. Excitable delirium used to be in just the provenance of stun guns. Yeah, people getting hit by stun guns, and all of a sudden they were having heart attacks. Yeah, that's excitable delirium. Has nothing to do with a stun gun, though. Okay, it's like a pre-existing condition, apparently. No one knew about until they made it up. A Trump-appointed federal judge put the brakes on Trump's challenge of mail balloting drop boxes in Pennsylvania. Now he's saying, you can't use drop boxes. They might have COVID on it. This is a guy that refuses to wear a mask because COVID is a hoax. And the Census Watchdog warns the Bureau is still not ready for the 2020 count. We're almost done with 2020. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Brazilian President Bolsonaro wants to punch a reporter in the face. Why? Well, for asking about mysterious bank deposits made in First Lady Michelle Bolsonaro's account. Oh, my. And nearly 100,000 Belarusian protesters defied the army and flooded into Minsk. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. page at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And I know this is a broken record. Every show we do this. I know. At least we're not Pacifica. We could be doing it all day. Anyway, our Patreon link is there because we really need your help. And we've needed your help for 10 years. Almost 10 years of this continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio broadcasting. And why? Because the bulk of what we do comes out of our own wallets. We need your help. And those who have helped us all these many years, thank you for your generosity. You know, we've had to purchase some newish machinery during the midst of this. And, of course, we're in the midst of purchasing newish machinery again since in December. Windows 7, this is how old our machinery is, at least on the PC side of the equipment equation. Windows 7 will no longer be supported, absolutely. And Flash disappears in December. Yeah, everything Flash. So we're still looking for another formatting computer, and we will be getting a broadcasting computer real soon, and that would be a MacBook because we need a laptop to be able to broadcast, because when the power goes out, at least the laptop keeps running, and that's what we need. So anyway, we make these appeals for funds because this is more than a shoestring and a couple of cans, indeed. But we're not NPR. We're NRR, Netroots Radio. And this is more than a vocation. This is a civic duty. And we really do appreciate you allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because Tom made it simple by making it at Netroots Radio. Who would have thought? Who? You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media, of course. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West because I don't know. Somehow I ended up with Cookbook West. And we're just going to have to live with it. And it's been that way since the inception of the show. Oh, yes, when we made a transition from a previous one. I can barely remember it anymore. Can you? Anyway, do follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found, and they are found everywhere. All right. Let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, this is something rather odd. Are we in a brave new world? Have we been in a brave new world for a lot longer than we've given it credit for? We may have. This article out of the Associated Press is by Patty Nieberg. Police stopped Elijah McClain on the street in suburban Denver last year after deeming the young black man suspicious because, why? He was black. And in Denver. He was thrown into a chokehold, threatened with a dog and stun gun, then subjected to another law enforcement tool before he died, a drug called ketamine. Paramedics inject it into people like McClain as a sedative, often at the behest of police who believe suspects are out of control, especially if they've hulked up and they're black. Boy, Monday, I always have this problem. Officially, ketamine is used in emergencies when there's a safety concern for medical staff or the patient. But it's increasingly found in arrests and has become another flashpoint in the debate over law enforcement policies and brutality against people of color. I expect them to start using it in the schools as soon as we go back into the schools. I do. An analysis by the AP of policies on ketamine in cases where the drug was used during police encounters uncovered a lack of police training, conflicting medical standards, and non-existent protocols that have resulted in hospitalizations and even deaths. But when you have implied immunity, it doesn't matter. Just give them the drug. On Monday, today, it will have been a year since McLean, age 23, was stopped by officers responding to a 911 call about a suspicious person wearing a ski mask and waving his arms. Police put him in a chokehold twice, and multiple officers pressed their body weight into him. Paramedics were called and injected McLean with ketamine, but they incorrectly estimated his weight, giving him more than 1.5 times the dose he should have received. He got 500 milligrams because they thought he weighed 220 pounds, but he was only 140. You know, when black people at 140 hulk up, man, 220. They just go right to 220. Oh, my God. Well, the police were afraid, and apparently the paramedics, too. Well, he suffered cardiac arrest and was later declared brain dead and taken off life support. The case where somebody's got 6 officers on them in a chokehold and needs ketamine is really pretty exceptional. That just doesn't happen very often, said Dr. George Lindbeck, chairman of the National Association of State EMS Officials Medical Directors Council. The vast majority of these scenarios get managed at a much lower level with much less physical restraint. No need for chemical restraint or sedation. Well, excuse me, why do they even have that? Injecting with a needle into someone's arm, a cop? After McLean's death, Colorado's health department opened an investigation into the growing use of ketamine, first approved for use in 2013, after the case got new attention during nationwide protests seeking police reform. Now, of course, there are no federal standards for law enforcement or emergency medical personnel on the drug's use. State policies and reporting requirements vary, so it's not clear how regularly it's used during police encounters and why. And we can rest assured we know exactly why. And whatever number they give us is going to be manifestly more than what they say. Before I jump into this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, in an article out of Reuters by Jarrett Renshaw, I just want to mention that this does actually connect with this upcoming story because DeJoy is going to be grilled in a more, shall we say, rigorous fashion today in front of the House, and I can't wait to watch that. So a federal judge yesterday, Sunday, ordered a stay in Trump's re-election campaign's lawsuit seeking to ban drop boxes and other changes to Pennsylvania's mail balloting procedures. We've had actual mail-in absentee ballots since before the Civil War, and it really ramped up during the Civil War. We've had it since the early 1800s. Come on! And actually, if you wanted to really put the pedal to the metal, the post office occurred way before that, around somebody's almanac period. Indeed, old Ben. The November 3rd election promises to be the nation's largest test of voting by mail, and the two major parties are locked in numerous lawsuits that will shape how millions of Americans vote this autumn. The Republican president, and we don't like to call Trump president, but Republican president, I think the Netroots Radio style manual will allow that, has repeatedly and without evidence said that an increase in mail-in ballots will lead to a surge in fraud, although Americans have long voted by mail. Oh, repeatedly without evidence, he said this. I think the official term for that, I looked it up. The official term is called lying. He lies. This is perhaps no more consequential. There is perhaps a no more consequential lawsuit than the one in Pennsylvania, which Trump won by less than 1 percentage point in 2016 and is considered essential to his re-election effort. Well, of course, they had to manipulate 70,000 votes, and 2 of the counties of the 3 in the nation were in Pennsylvania. J. Nicholas Ranjan, U.S. District Judge for Western Pennsylvania, said the federal case brought by the Trump campaign would not move forward until similar lawsuits in state courts are completed or unless they are delayed. Justin Clark, Trump's deputy campaign manager, said the judge's decision recognized that the issue touched on both state and constitutional issues. The federal court is simply going to reserve its judgment on this in the hopes that the state court will resolve these serious issues and guarantee that every Pennsylvanian has their vote counted once. You know, like it's always been done before, you little twerp. The Trump campaign is seeking to ban ballot drop boxes, which were deployed in the state's most recent primary and that allow voters to submit absentee ballots and bypass the U.S. Postal Service. Trump can't have that since he's hamstrung the post office. You know, you can't hack mail-in ballots. You can hack hackable voting machines. He wants you to vote in person on a hackable voting machine so he can get installed in the Oval Office the same way like before. And you don't think votes were flipped? Come on. The campaign argues the drop boxes were not explicitly authorized in a bipartisan bill passed by the state legislature last year that expanded the state's mail balloting procedures. You know, a litigious guy like Trump, he's just going to sue, even if the suit is frivolous. How about getting a slap suit on this mofo? Oh, implied immunity, that the OLC has some sort of implied immunity card. Yeah, I bet they do. The judge, a Trump appointee, said the suit involved state laws, and he would defer for now to the state courts. Oh, really? The court will apply the brakes to this lawsuit and allow the Pennsylvania state courts to weigh in and interpret the state statutes that undergird plaintiffs' federal constitutional campaigns. The Trump campaign says the ballot drop boxes invites fraud. The federal judge asked the campaign to provide evidence of actual fraud, but the campaign declined, arguing it did not have to do so in order to win the case. Evidence? We don't need to give you no stinking evidence. Ever-present anonymous worker bees, this time at the Associated Press, bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Census Bureau is short by more than 25% of the door knockers needed in the 2020 census, according to its watchdog agency, and it's about to let go of its least productive census takers. Both developments highlight persistent questions about whether the Bureau has enough manpower to get a complete and accurate head count under an accelerated time frame preferred by the Trump administration. Bureau officials, though, say they are pleased with the progress made by census takers and are on pace to finish the job. The Office of Inspector General's alert this last week says it is concerned about the Bureau's ability to hire and retain workers with 6 weeks left in the count. That helps determine the distribution of $1.5 trillion in federal spending and how many congressional seats and electoral college votes each state gets. Wow, this is almost like what we would call a Vladian effort to mess up America, isn't it? And you would be correct. The Bureau needed more than 300,000 census takers by the end of August, but by mid-month, just 220,000 census takers were trained and ready to start knocking on the doors of households that haven't yet responded to the census. 37 of the nation's 248 census offices aren't even halfway toward reaching their hiring goals, the office said. Without taking timely action, the Bureau is at risk of not conducting a complete and accurate 2020 census, the memorandum from the Office of Inspector General said. The Bureau acknowledged that more than a third of the people hired to be census takers are not showing up for either training or their assignments, despite the greater than expected attrition, and I wonder if it has something to do with a pandemic. The Bureau said it has increased productivity while aggressively training new workers to fill slots of no-shows. The statistical agency is still recruiting and hiring census takers to fill the jobs of people who have dropped out over coronavirus fears or other concerns, and it's giving cash awards to the most experienced census takers. All right, that takes us to our break, and we will go through weather from around the world when we get back from that break, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Seasons Past. That's the non-accidental title of a first-time novel written by our protagonist Kate Conklin in the new movie I Used to Go Here. Kate is 35 years old. Most of her friends are pregnant, while her fiancé has just dumped her. Her baby is the aforementioned book, to which we are introduced during a phone call from her publisher that we hear as she walks through the streets of Chicago. That's not going too well either. Sales are low and her book tour has been canceled. Kate, Community's Jillian Jacobs, is seeing her life come apart just as her old writing professor and former crush from college, David, played by Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords, calls to invite her back to campus for a reading and Q&A. Needing the ego boost, she's there, picked up by a student guide and driver who's just the first in an array of wonderfully eccentric supporting characters. Most of these are students now inhabiting her old digs who initially point out to her that they were in kindergarten when she lived there. They accept her as a real writer, but are just as accepting when she regresses into one of them, even becoming involved in a plot to expose a professor, no less than her benefactor Dave, as the horn dog that he apparently is. The details in this one feel right, and it turns out the film is at least somewhat autobiographical, as director Chris Ray, formerly Chris Swanberg, hails from Chicago, has done the breakup thing and attended SIU in Carbondale, Illinois, where the film is set. I Used to Go Here occupies the same space as some Apatow pictures, but with enough nuance and subtlety for issues of maturity, self-acceptance, and sincerity to shine through to nicely darken this low-key comedy. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Hundreds of millions of years ago, reptilian predators called ichthyosaurs swam the seas. Their fossils look fearsome, but paleobiologist Ryosuke Motani of UC Davis says they may have looked more like friendly dolphins.
Yeah, maybe in life, ichthyosaurs might have been cute, but they are at least the smaller ones.
Motani's team studied one such specimen found in southwest China. It was 240 million years old, 15 feet long, but it seemed to have some extra bones in it, which Motani's team determined to be the remains of a 13-foot-long thalattosaur, or sea lizard, the ichthyosaur had swallowed. And spoiler alert, the only reason they were able to see this animal in the belly of the ichthyosaur is that this gigantic meal never got digested. The ichthyosaur died soon after swallowing it. Motani was careful to say they're not sure exactly why the ichthyosaur perished, but the specimen has a broken neck, so he gave a speculative play-by-play. Perhaps, he says, the ichthyosaur snapped at the sea lizard, but the lizard fought back.
And the fighting between the two was fierce, probably.
So the ichthyosaur fought to subdue its prey, damaging its neck in the process. Then it had to dislodge the prey's bony head and tail from its juicy midsection.
Now, the predator had to do it through jerking and twisting, like the crocodiles do.
Also bad for the neck. And finally, the ichthyosaur had to swallow the animal, perhaps using inertia or gravity to shove the prey down its gullet.
And the chances are, by the time it was ingested, maybe the neck damage had accumulated to a certain level, and maybe the neck could not support the head.
Details of that ancient battle appear in the journal iScience. And the reason why this analysis matters is you can only infer so much about who ate who by looking at teeth. This fossil offers direct evidence that these ancient beasts sometimes bit off a whole lot more than they could chew. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. The year was 1877. That summer, during what came to be known as the Great Upheaval, police, the U.S. Army, and the National Guard brutally crushed a national railroad strike. The simmering anger of working people had many elected officials and industrialists on edge. One man saw the labor unrest as a business opportunity. And on this day in labor history, the treasurer of the Gatlin Gun Company wrote a letter to the president of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad with a proposal. He wrote, "We have the honor to suggest that you strengthen yourself now against such emergencies in the future by providing yourselves with Gatling guns. 4 or 5 men only are required to operate it, and one Gatling with a full supply of ammunition can clear a street or track and keep it clear." The 6-barrel hand-cranked weapon could fire 200 bullets a minute. Upgrades to the gun soon had it cranking out an astonishing 600 bullets a minute. This ferocious new weapon set its sights on the cause of labor. In 1878, in Cleveland, Ohio, 25 prominent citizens formed the Cleveland Gatlin Gun Battery to deal with labor uprisings. Armed with 2 of the new guns, the militia drilled and held social events, but never fired the gun against workers. Militias from San Francisco to Connecticut, from Kansas to Pennsylvania, likewise armed themselves. Perhaps the place where the gun became most infamously used against labor was in the Colorado mining wars. In 1914, a Gatlin-type gun mounted on an armored car was used to shoot up a workers' tent city in Ludlow.
Pavlichenko, well known to fame, Russia's your country.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
All time to come, 300 Nazis fell by your gun.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Another day, another unarmed black man shot by police in America. This time it was Kenosha, Wisconsin. Video shows officers with guns drawn following Jacob Blake as he attempted to enter his car with his young children already in the back seat. With one cop holding on to Blake's shirt, at least 7 gunshots are heard, and the man appears to go limp in the car. Police say they were called to deal with a domestic disturbance. Mr. Blake reportedly was trying to break up a fight between 2 women. Separately, police clashed with protesters in Lafayette, Louisiana on Saturday, a day after officers there shot and killed Trayford Pellerin, a 31-year-old black man, outside a convenience store. So now it's the Republicans' turn. The Republican National Convention gets underway Monday, and in a typically Trumpian move, the Orange One himself will speak each night. The full schedule for the convention has been kept secret, but the lineup of speakers includes some curious choices, like Mark and Patricia McCloskey. They're the Missouri couple who pointed guns at Black Lives Matter protesters passing their house back in June. And Nicholas Sandmann, a Kentucky teenager who sued news outlets over their coverage of his stare down with a Native American protester in Washington last year. Most of Trump's children will also make appearances, as will First Lady Melania Trump. As for the 2020 Republican Party platform, well, this I just couldn't even make up if I tried. They posted a document quietly on GOP.com over the weekend. Under the menu item Republican Platform, you find the resolution regarding the Republican Party platform. The one-page notice says, resolved, that the Republican Party has and will continue to enthusiastically support the president's America First agenda. And down the page a bit, resolved. Yeah, big bold typo on the word resolved. Still there on Monday morning. That the 2020 Republican National Convention will adjourn without adopting a new platform until the 2024 Republican National Convention. So the Republicans also just copied and pasted their 2016 platform without editing it. That means that an attack on the White House and the current administration was left in the text. Quote, the current administration has exceeded its constitutional authority, brazenly and flagrantly violated the separation of powers, sought to divide America into groups, and turn citizen against citizen. Wow, we actually agree. Donald Trump on Sunday announced emergency authorization to treat COVID-19 patients with convalescent plasma, a move that he called a breakthrough, one of his top health officials called promising, and other health experts said needs more study before it's celebrated. The announcement came after White House officials complained there were politically motivated delays by the Food and Drug Administration in approving a vaccine and therapeutics for the disease. This decision came after Trump had been pressuring the FDA to move faster. The FDA saying that convalescent plasma has been used to treat more than 70,000 COVID-19 patients and that the, quote, known and potential benefits of the product outweigh the known and potential risks. While early studies have shown some promise, some health experts argue that data from randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trials is needed before it can be determined that the treatment is effective against COVID-19. They haven't been done yet. Less than a day after 15-year-old Claudia Conway, daughter of Kellyanne Conway and George Conway, announced her intention to seek emancipation from her very Republican parents, they both announced that they'd be stepping away from their respective roles in the administration and the Lincoln Project to focus their attention on their family. Speaking of family, Donald Trump's sister, the retired federal judge Marianne Trump Barry, said her brother, quote, has no principles, is a liar and a cheat, and more, in conversations that surreptitiously were recorded by her niece, Mary Trump.
Donald's out for Donald, period. When he started to say something to me, boy, look at what I've done for you. And I said, you have done nothing. Deliberately. I have never asked him for a favor.
The Washington Post released some of these recordings over the weekend. It was a busy weekend. The House was in a special session on Saturday, called back by Nancy Pelosi to address the Postal Service crisis created by the Trump administration. They passed a $25 billion funding package that also blocks new Postmaster General Louis DeJoy's attempts to foment chaos and inefficiency. Trump was on the golf course, but he promised to veto the bill if somehow Mitch McConnell ever even takes it up and it manages to pass the Senate. And it was bipartisan, with 26 Republicans joining all Democrats in voting for the bill. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of nearly the same as yesterday, and yesterday was around 90 to 95, so about the same. Clouds and some sun this morning, with more clouds this afternoon. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Some clouds overnight, with overnight lows in the low 60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And mostly sunny tomorrow. High in the low to mid 90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County here in Southern Oregon now stands at 654, but that is only before the weekend. Totals have been totally totaled. We still remain at 2 deceased, though that is, of course, a gross undercount. Very gross. Grass pollen right outside the window here at the mothership is considered low, but something's causing me to want to sneeze. The air quality index is good at 48 parts per million, a little high in the good range. We had a lot of smoke from the California fires. There are a couple of wildfires nearby, but those winds are pushing those fires' smoke elsewhere. But we're pulling in some of the Northern California conflagrations. Conflagrations? Yes. The fires in Northern California. And we had pretty bad air yesterday about mid-afternoon until, well, all night. Not so bad today, but 48 parts per million is pretty high in that good range, as I mentioned. The daytime UV index is only merely high at 7, but do take care, because that's still a lot, and you better slather on the 30 SPF, maybe even 50. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.9 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 76%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 72 and partly cloudy. Paris is 74 and cloudy. Rome is 85 and fair with thunderstorm activity and an advisory that the electrical aspect of those thunderstorms could knock out their electrical grid, which it had done quite a bit over the weekend. Kyiv is 75 and fair. Kabul is 85 and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 52 and clear. San Francisco, California is 58, mostly cloudy with a red flag warning, meaning, bad air from the smoke, and don't burn anything because it'll catch on fire. And New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. That is weather from around the world brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazilian President Bolsonaro said he wanted to punch a reporter in the face for asking about bank deposits made in the account of his wife, First Lady Michelle Bolsonaro, by a former aide to one of his sons. "I want to punch you in the face, okay?" the right-wing president replied to the reporter from the O Globo newspaper. And that was according to an audio that was released by the Daily. Earlier this month, local media reported that the aide, Fabrico Quaros, deposited 72,000 reais in checks in the First Lady's account between 2011 and 2018, and I apologize, I do not know the exchange rate on the real. The Quaros was an aide to now Senator Flavio Bolsonaro, the president's oldest son, when he was a Rio de Janeiro state legislator. The former aide is under arrest in an investigation into bank deposits made at the time amounting to the equivalent of $213,500 U.S. Questions about Quaros have continued to hound the Bolsonaro family in an investigation that has appeared to annoy the president and dent his promise not to tolerate corruption. Well, he doesn't tolerate it among anybody but except his closest inner circle.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Andrei Markovsky of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Almost 100,000 protesters demanding Belarusian leader Lukashenko step down defied a warning from the military and flooded into Minsk, briefly gathering near the president's residence before dispersing peacefully. The veteran leader denounced the demonstrators as rats and was seen in state media footage wearing body armor and holding a rifle, projecting an unyielding image of somebody who has a really small dick. In this reporter's opinion, the protests have provided the biggest challenge yet to Lukashenko's 26 years at the helm and tested the loyalty of his security services. Indeed, they do. Well, this could be a harbinger of what could happen to us if we let things get out of hand, and by out of hand, you know what I mean. That we don't show up in massive numbers between now and Election Day and vote. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.